I'll first start with what are cognitive biases and why you should be aware of them, right? And then I'll explain some biases which I've kept around, which I've seen happen more often in different companies that I have been a part of. So cognitive bias is a term which was introduced in like 1970s, right? And basically, it's why often people make mistakes in their reasoning, right? So usually, what happens are most of the quick decisions that we make are based on heuristics, right? That we have developed over the years. So these are like mental shortcuts that you have made. So like one quick example could be if your vessel is hot, don't touch it with bare hands, right? This is a quick heuristic, right? You are trying to avoid actually touching it and then burning yourself and then realizing that I'm supposed to do it, right? So these are some heuristics that you have built. Not all heuristics are bad, but then there are some which will hamper your decision making and may lead to erroneous decisioning, right? So some biases which you should try to avoid, right? I think one of the major ones is a confirmation bias, right? As product managers, you have to make decisions based on evidence. And sometimes what happens is like you have a belief system, you have your own worldview. And when you look at evidence, you'll cherry pick evidence which supports your worldview, and while ignoring everything else that is there. So of course, for you, it is correct. And the most funny thing about is two very separate people who are looking at two very different, worldviews may look at the same evidence and then say, yes, my answer is correct. Because they cherry picked the ones which they matched with, right? And now they are fighting low, oh, which one is correct, right? So it is important that, yes, your answer may be correct, right? But it is very important that you look at everything else before you arrive at that decision. So, right, don't fall into the confirmation bias. It's very easy to fall into one. Right. Another bias which is actually related to confirmation bias is a bias to build. Right. So as product managers, you'll be tasked with, delivering stuff sprint by sprint. And sometimes what happens is like you're stuck in that cycle of delivering one thing after the other, right? And because there's a general pressure, everyone is delivering stuff. I want to deliver something, but there is a very small thing that you should do or could do is take a step back every once in a while, do some research, and then understand whatever you are building, is it actually going to solve the problem, or are you just building it because you have to and it's your job, right? So that is another bias, right? The bias to build. One very common bias, and I don't think this one is limited to product managers, it is related to everyone who works in corporate or a startup or anywhere, is authority approval bias, right? So that means you are building and creating things which your superiors, right, will be okay with, right? Regardless of whether that's the best thing for the product to do or not, right? And one way to check if you are in that bias is to see whenever you come up with product concepts, right? Are you being questioned on them? So if you're not being questioned, there are two scenarios. One is you're the best product manager ever, right? That the company has seen and they love you. If you're there, well and good, I'm happy for you. But if you're not there, that means you're creating things which are, which the leadership wants you to create, right? And now the thing is, sometimes the best product ideas also are not very apparent to people, right? So you should be, ready to fight for your, decision. And how will you fight for them is by doing due diligence for your product, understanding both the pros and the cons, between your implementation or any other implementation which is being suggested, and make a defined decision. If you have to explain it to your authorities, explain it to them, right? But like, do not fall into that bias, because eventually what it will lead to is suboptimal products. So we don't want that. The another bias is availability bias, right? And that is a human's tendency to rely on information that is readily available. Now, what do I mean by readily available? That these information, the source of this information is your prior experiences, your vivid memories, news articles that you read, or any other article that you read any other fringe article that you read somewhere, right? Yes, you will be able to make a very quick decisions because you have things in your mind. But what you'll end up doing is avoiding the laborious task of going and doing fact checking, whether this is correct or not even. And if you're not doing that, right, the conclusion, yes, you'll arrive at a conclusion much faster, but there may be errors in your reasoning, right? So try and avoid that. The last one that I'll cover is called a familiarity bias. And that is a human's tendency to stay in their comfort zone, right? And this is very common because what happens is like, as you move ahead in your career, you understand that a product manager, some things work, some things don't work, right? But at the same time, what you are not doing is exploring what can be innovated upon. So you're saying, okay, yeah, this works. I know my users will give me a certain number of funnel success rate. I'm happy with it. I don't want to change anything. I don't want to change the status quo. I'm happy, right? So you will tend to do that. And what you're doing in turn is like you're missing the chance to innovate and create something which could have been much, much better, right? So these are some biases that I've encountered. There are more that you can go ahead and read upon. There is a very good article by Ashutosh Dabral on biases. I highly recommend that you go and read him. He has written a lot of things on biases. So yeah, those are the biases that I would tell you about for now.